go ahead and get started. So welcome everyone. Saturday, we're still going strong, right? Yeah? Woohoo! Home stretch. So much going on in our heads right now. But I think this is going to be a really interesting panel, a roundtable. And I'm really excited about this. So my name is Amanda Ryman, and I am the policy manager for the DPA California office. And I'm also a marijuana expert. That's a real job, even though people don't believe me when I tell them that. But I've been studying cannabis for over 10 years from a research perspective. And I live in Oakland, California. So one of the things that I was struck by when I first started studying this was the product variety that was a result of medical marijuana regulation. And once medical marijuana dispensaries started popping up, people started asking about, well, what's in that brownie? You've got this brownie just kind of wrapped in tinfoil, or what strain is that? Or do you have anything that's not smokable? Or what about that lotion over there? I mean, it really just blew up. And as we move towards the adult regulation of cannabis, I think the market is just going to get bigger. And different ways of ingesting cannabis, different ways of using cannabis. I mean, I don't think we've even just scratched the surface of what that's going to look like after we have 10 or 15 years of regulated cannabis use for adults. So I'm really excited today to have an amazing roundtable of really the leaders in the industry around these different methods of ingestion, and some individuals that have been around looking at this issue for a while and have seen this evolution take place. So I'm going to have each of our panelists introduce themselves and say a little bit about the work that they do, and then I'm going to ask them some questions, and then we're going to open it up, because I know that there's a lot of questions from people out there that maybe don't live in a medical cannabis state or have seen the proliferation of these products and have questions about their uses. So I'm hoping this will be an opportunity for us to learn a lot, as well as have an opportunity to hear from our experts. So I'm just going to go ahead and start at the end, and then you can pass it down.
Thank you, Amanda. My name is Alan St. Pierre, the Executive Director of NORML, and I would love to call my mother now and let her know that I'm an expert in ingestion of cannabis. That is beautiful. And of course, NORML lobbies around the country to reform marijuana laws.
Hi, my name is Wanda James, and I am the owner of Simply Pure and the owner of James Fox Communications. We do a lot of advocacy on behalf of the cannabis industry. We have worked with 64, we've worked with the governor's office. I would say that our claim to fame is we are restaurateurs. My husband and I have been owning restaurants now for well over 20 years. And we've owned a dispensary, and like I said, we decided to open up with Simply Pure, which is a cannabis edible company. We are no longer, right now anyway, currently not producing edibles in Colorado because of the banking issue. And because we are business people and because we are entrepreneurs, we are fighting for the opportunity for Colorado to come along to allow people to have banking, to have investments, to have credit cards, to have access to capital, which quite frankly is the biggest issue to increasing what we believe is going to be the largest explosion in the cannabis industry, which is what people are going to be doing with food, both medicinally and recreationally. And for fun, I don't know if you've all seen my husband, Scott Durrell, on numerous television shows, cooking for CBS, Eat, Drink, and Be Merry this morning for, Thanksgiving, or if you've seen him on MSNBC at our restaurant doing cooking classes. And the interesting thing that we see with our cooking classes is that people who are there are usually well over the age of 45, usually men, women, mostly women, that really want to learn how to cook and do interesting things with cannabis, whether they're cooking for somebody in their household who has cancer or whether they're getting ready to feed their family for Thanksgiving and want to know how to do that. So we are excited to be able to bring real food. We always laugh when we say we are well past the brownie stage. We're talking about real food, real delicacies, real chefs, real foodies. And that's what we do.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Our claim to fame is we consider ourselves edible or ingestible experts. So I really am glad to be here. We started out making edibles, and we learned very quickly that in order to dose correctly, which is for cannabis medicine, the key is dosing, that we had to take it out of the food and get it down to where it was measurable, down to milligrams per milliliters, and down to the most infinite tiny amounts into the 0.001 seriously by a medical community. And to work with it, that's what we had to do. So we took it out of our Aunt Zelda's natural edibles and became Aunt Zelda's. And we took our infused oils out of our carrot cakes and out of our muffins and out of our things and put it into bottles with a dropper where we could tell people exactly how many milligrams were in each drop. And that way we said, if you want to have a brownie, go and buy the most delicious brownie you can possibly find and eat it. But in the meantime, take X number of drops and put them under your tongue and take your medicine, and then eat your brownie. And so we have become quite expert at this, and we now have a line of specially chosen strains for different diseases, and we use the infused oils, and then when the dose gets to a certain amount, in other words, let's say somebody would have to take 4 droppers full at a time, which would be a large amount of oil to infuse. We then move them over to an extracted oil, which would be in what people call the hash oil or the infused oil, the cannabis oil that's in the complete extract, where they then can be dosed at a higher level for things like cancers and the more serious diseases. But we definitely believe that the medicine should be treated as a medicine separately than the food. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Ian Sieb. I am one of the co-founders and operators of both Denver Relief and Denver Relief Consulting. Denver Relief is the longest continuously running medical marijuana center here in the Mile High City. And we think that we're the second longest continuously running center in Colorado. So I'm humbled to be up here with all of these people that I've come to watch and admire over the years, and to be considered an expert is quite humbling. So I'll tell you very briefly, I would like to think that I'm well versed in all forms of dosing, playing a bud tender for several years, and now moving into Denver Relief Consulting, which I'd like to think is one of the nation's leading cannabis consulting organizations. We have about 40 clients in 10 states and the District of Columbia. We're also working in Canada and the UK with clients and helping them establish their applications, getting started in states where things are emerging for the end of prohibition as we know it, and helping with both medical and adult use cannabis sales around the country. So I'm here to speak about all forms of ingestion, as I'd like to think I know a little bit about all of them. Thank you.
My name is Christy Lunsford, and I am the Media and Marketing Director for Dixie Elixirs and Edibles, one of the largest infused companies in the state of Colorado. We are spending our days and weeks right now reformulating and getting ready for adult use consumption in the state of Colorado, as well as taking our products line nationally to other medical and adult use states. And have a background specifically in topical applications of cannabis and in pairing cannabis and other herbs for medicinal and therapeutic effect.
Hi, Dale Geringer with California Normal. Been involved in consumer issues for many years now. Actually, did some of the pioneering research on vaporizers, which we have promoted as harm reduction alternatives, and we're just active recently in defeating legislation in California to try to restrict vaporizers to non-smoking areas only. I've also been involved in research on lab testing, an important new field in the industry. Did sponsor some ring tests where we looked at the consistency between different labs, and just finished work with the workshop down in Los Angeles on a survey of terpene and cannabinoid profiles of the various kinds of cannabis that are out on the market, which I'd be happy to discuss later. We're also interested in safety issues, which we're going to discuss later, right? So I'll pass it on to James.
Thanks very much. Good morning, everybody. My name is James Sladek. I'm the CEO of Medwest. We're from San Diego, California. We're known here in Colorado as our Open Vape. This little vape pen, it's a product that has come to somewhat of a standing as a brand name in the last year or so. The premise is supercritical fluid extracted CO2 oil, and we make a variety of medicines around that, from soft gels, sublinguals, and so forth. But the delivery mechanism of the pen has gone on one of our little advertising slogans, even though it's not medical, was "Get high on the down low," because now you can use cannabis. I'm also, I come from this as a business standpoint. I've only been in cannabis for about 4 years, but unfortunately I drank the Kool-Aid, and now I spend at least 25% of my time on activism issues. We recently founded a group affiliated with National Cannabis Industry Association, the California Cannabis Industry Association, because there was a place, or as Nate, our executive director, said, there was a parking place in Sacramento for someone to speak on behalf of the business interests. So I'm happy to be on the panel. One thing, when we talk about these delivery methods and the change, and is the joint obsolete, that's a rather provocative title, because I've been mentioning that informally with the attendees throughout the week, and gotten a lot of visceral things. The joint will never be dead, and I think and I think similar to I think I came to the analogy of the vinyl record. You know, it never died. It just kind of went down in its proliferation as a medium. And I think one of the reasons is the dosing ability and the blending ability, being able to do high CBD vapor pens and things that are really changing the profile for delivery of cannabinoids. And I was one of the people in the audience is my intellectual property attorney, and one of the things we were glancing at this morning was the portfolio of patents from GW Pharmaceutical. And we haven't really done all of the digging, but it appears that they have an issued U.S. patent on vape pen delivery of cannabinoids, which opens up a bunch of federal and legal issues that could be talked about at another panel. But I think suffice it to say that this is a panel and a discussion in an area that sort of leads on and on and on from there. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So really amazing roundtable. So where I'd like to start with this is, there's been some concern expressed from the medical cannabis community that the impact of adult use will impact the needs of medical cannabis patients, that the needs of recreational users over 21 in terms of the safety, quality, types of products, dosing information is going to be different than those who use cannabis purely for medical purposes. So, Maura, maybe you can start, because that's kind of your practice is developing these tinctures for medical use. Do you have concerns? Do your patients have concerns about how full legalization will impact the development and continued development of these purely medical products?
Yes, thank you. Our patients are, for the most part, we have two groups of patients. We have the pediatric, but then we have this adults that, for the most part, their experience as, well, back in college or high school, they had smoked some pot, and for the most part, that pot was high THC, may have been 10% or 12% or something, and a lot of them, their experience was, oh, it made me paranoid, or oh, I got the munchies, or oh, it was fun, but then I got on with my life. And now they're coming to it as baby boomers, and they're scared. They've got all these medical issues. They're not getting their needs met by their doctors. And so they want this, well, we have the gamut of situations where somebody that we're having to desensitize, or I should say sensitize to THC by starting them out with a drop that they put on a pulse point to get them desensitized because one little drop sublingually, and our tinctures are not with any alcohol, because we infuse directly the flour that's decarboxylated into oil, because there's also the issues with so many people that have substance abuse. So we don't do anything into alcohol in our infused oils. We infuse directly. Anyway, that's another issue. But and plus we're titrating so many people off of opiates. I mean, there's so many issues with the aging population, and because they're so over-medicated with so many other things, that their sensitivity is so strong when we first start them with this, and then they're afraid, well, their doctors won't write them prescriptions. So we're having to educate them on the fact that their doctors won't lose their licenses. We have to find doctors for them to go to where they won't be put into a situation where they're sitting there with other people that say, oh yeah, you know, the skateboard thing, write me a rec. And
so are they expressing concern about what will happen under legalization? Like if they...
Well, yes, they're concerned that they're going to lose their jobs. They're concerned that they're going to be on some list somewhere.
Under legalization.
Well, under legalization, they're concerned where are they going to get their medicine? Is it going to be something where they're going to have to start going to a pharmacy? Are they going to lose us as a source of their medicine? Is it going to be taken over by a pharmaceutical, where all of a sudden is it going to be where they're not going to be able to just get their medicine consistency? What's going to happen?
So there is a concern among medical patients that once we go full legalization, the attention paid to getting them specific strains or producing it in a certain way might go away. And so I would, if Ian, if you want to comment, you know, having experience in a dispensary and serving medical patients that's now kind of moving towards an adult use market, do you see different patient populations gravitating towards different products? So, you know, do you see kind of that transition happening already in the dispensary between kind of a recreational market and a more purely medical market? And is that reflected in the products that people use?
Indeed it is. We have noted a significant change in what patients are spending their money on right now. Medical is still in effect, or medical is in effect here in Colorado, and I'm sure most of you are aware, but the plan is January 1st to allow adults from all over the world over the age of 21 access into our facilities. And if we choose to either co-locate or I forget what the other term is, have both medical and recreational in the same space with one individual entrance and exit. So we are seeing 3-4 years ago when we first started, 90+% of our sales were in the flowers, in the bud, smoking itself. Over time, we started to see a noted change as edibles, Simply Pure, Dixie, as they started to emerge. We saw a noted change in that more people were starting to use edibles. Then we had the OPEN come on, and OPEN has taken a significant portion of vaporizing products, have taken a significant portion of the market share. In our facility alone now, we're seeing about 55-60% in flower sales, 20+% in vaporizer sales, and around 20+% in edible sales as well. So that there is a noted change. There's certainly a change in the demographics of who is procuring which items. I think that you will find that people who are looking for more discretion, more professionals, are going the route of an edible product or the route of a vape product. The fact that they, if they choose to, could pretty much walk down the street and not be noticed that they're partaking, as opposed to somebody who is smoking a joint and needs to, under ideal situations, do so in their own home. So yes, there is a noted change in the shift where people are going as recreational comes on board. I'm of the opinion that a lot of people are going to come here and purchase flowers in the beginning because it's the first time, and why not? But while we're here, let's grab an edible, let's grab a vape. And so it's really spreading, it's changing every day. There's so many technological advancements. You would think for a plant that's been around for thousands of years that you wouldn't see almost like Moore's law of microprocessors, and that every 18 months it seems like this industry is reinventing itself with these new products and devices and methods of ingestion.
I think one of the things that I get a little annoyed at sometimes is the idea of this fear. Fear, 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 fear. I'm really kind of tired of hearing the word fear. This is an amazing industry that is growing all the way across the nation. The opportunities for entrepreneurial advancement in all areas is huge. We've seen tremendous things happening on the medical front. You know, Dr. Gupta just came out with what we've seen happen with oils and different things that we can do with epilepsy. But the other side of this, you guys, is, and the point that we always bring up is, everybody is going to have a different reason for doing different things. An aspirin can save your life from a heart attack. It can also stop that nagging headache that you've got this morning, right? So if you want to be able to talk about what's good for you and medicate at the same time, why do we always have to draw the line between on how we're getting those types of things? So if a woman wants to sit down and have lunch with her friends and have a peanut butter bar afterwards or a granola bar on a walk in the woods, I don't see anything wrong with that. I also think that the idea of having edibles in different forms, having the vape pen in different forms, is just going to allow us to continue to grow. It's the same thing when you go to a grocery store, you don't buy just one type of thing. And we have a lot of different things that we use for medicine as well as keeping us whole and healthy. And I think that that's what we're moving to. It's just a whole entrepreneurial outburst of where this industry is going. And we've got to lose the word fear because the patients will be well taken care of, as will the people that just really want a great birthday cake.
I think you bring up a really good point, Wanda, which is about stigma. So I wanted to ask the panel, maybe Alan and Dale had thought about this. The idea of, well, I'm eating a brownie or I'm using a vapor pen, there's no smell, you can't see the marijuana, therefore maybe it's a less stigmatized action than smoking a joint and being so obvious about what you're doing. So if you could maybe talk a little bit about how you've seen stigma around marijuana users evolve and what the role you think is of kind of these new ways of consuming in addressing stigma. So now, maybe the person that was afraid to use marijuana at a festival because they didn't want people to know they were doing it has no problem eating a brownie or using a vapor pen because they feel like they can do so and not be stigmatized. So, what do you think?
Yeah, right. Smoking is really, really stigmatized in California. You can't have even a rented conference room or a hotel room or a restaurant room or private room ventilated even where you can have any kind of smoking. That law, the state law, is actually tobacco specific, but many progressive cities have extended their laws to include smoking of any kind of herb, including marijuana. And we have parts of California now where it's illegal to smoke in apartment buildings or shared residences, and some of these places are enforcing this against medical marijuana users. So they really have medical users in many parts of California have no alternative but something other than smoking. And I really think the vape pen is the way to go. It's a real hit in this regard. We have to remember here that there is an offensive going on to try to so-called regulate vaporizers and e-cigarettes and to restrict or prohibit them somehow. And as I said, we just had a bill in California, and there have been bills introduced in other states to basically prohibit vaporizers anywhere where smoking is banned. I think we have to remember the basis for the smoking ban was the proven risks of secondhand tobacco smoke, which has been shown in epidemiological studies with no uncertainty whatsoever, very strongly demonstrated. Now, of course, we're dealing with marijuana where first-hand smoking risks have not been conclusively demonstrated, let alone second-hand smoking risks. But when you move over to vaporizers, all right, they completely eliminate the punitive risks of practically any of either of tobacco or of marijuana. By the way, some of the tobacco e-cigarettes have no heating or combustion whatsoever. There's these little flavor things that people are sucking on that might candies. There's no emissions. The other emissions that have been detected from e-cigarettes are really like, you know, orders of magnitude lower than anything that would be significant. Now, our opponents have tried to pick up on a handful of studies of certain of the very many devices, e-cigarette devices out there to try to claim, well, you know, there were detectable amounts of carbon monoxide here, there, or the other place. Therefore, these are unsafe, and until they're proven safe, we ought to ban them in public. And that's the battle we're fighting right now. But I think we have really good, strong evidence on our side, and we're trying to make some common cause now with the tobacco harm reduction people. There's a group called CAZA, which operates on the East Coast in defense of tobacco e-cigarettes, and we're joining forces with them because this is a common harm reduction issue.
Policy question then for Alan. You know, if the state says, well, we'll legalize marijuana, but we just won't let you smoke it. I mean, we've had, you know, we were talking on the last roundtable about a push here in Denver to make it illegal to basically smell like marijuana. And given that marijuana is so pungent and that the vaporizers kind of address that, you know, would Normal support something like that? Or would they say, no, you know, that's great that you want to legalize it, we can't take away people's right to smoke, even if it's a compromise that changes policy?
Thank you. This is a fascinating question. I mean, going back to the 1990s, early 1990s, it was clear that smoking was going to become verboten, ostracized, and then seeing the lawsuits and the tort liabilities that go along with it. So, rhetorically speaking, our opponent seized upon the idea that there's no smoked medicines, largely inhaled medicines, etc., not smoked. So, rhetorically, the movement itself started to embrace what were originally volatilizers, better described, but of course later vaporizers. I think Dale was at Lester Grinspoon's house in 95 or 96, where we had a Normal board meeting where some MIT students had provided us one of the first prototypes of what we call a vaporizer today. And of course, what I've alluded to Amanda, Dale and I were at the High Times office a couple weeks ago, and this has changed the entire dynamics of both the business side of cannabis today and likely where it's going to be going in the future. In 2004, I stepped off of a stage after giving a lecture, and a kid had a pen, and had a shirt that said, "Got vape." I thought, okay. And today, last week I was at a conference, the first e-cigarette conference in DC. So this is definitely becoming very institutionalized. It was entirely around tobacco, but bubbling right below the surface was clear was cannabis. That same day, a legislator in Maryland introduced a bill to ban e-cigarettes, for which I was on a show later in the day debating with him. And when asking him, why would you do this, he said, I just don't like the way it looks. So it's not based in science at all, of course, Dale. It's visceral. It's a visceral anti-tobaccoism. So from Normal's point of view, we just want to make sure that consumers or patients have the best, most affordable delivery devices that they want to have access to. If it's medicine and it's prescribed, fine. But in terms of a consumer, you simply want to be able to get the device to be the most efficient, and therefore, when we think about most of our lives blowing joints in the wind, bongs, etc., water, to see the effectiveness of vape pens. And so I think I wrote a piece for a publication in February, and I said something like, I've seen the future of cannabis consumption in its vaporization through these pens. In the High Times office, they had a supplement coming out in a couple of months. There are 39, as you probably well know, Jim, 39 competing vapor pens today. And so High Times has added 20 pages of advertising around concentrates and the tools and things associated with it. And a couple of months after that, they'll have another supplement with 20 or 30 pages added regarding dab rigs. So it's completely changed the nature of consuming cannabis and the marketplace that's emerging today.
Christine? I would just like to say that historically, lots of medicines have been smoked, from mullein to chamomile to marijuana, and that if we as consumers want to consistently have the opportunity to smoke raw plant material, that we need to own that and continue to have that both medicinally and recreationally.
I want to address what I said at the beginning about the fear with our patients in particular, because I'm addressing a very different patient, I believe, than the one that walks into a dispensary. Because our patients don't go in. We have the alternative population to the dispensary patient. Our patient doesn't walk in there looking for flowers and for edibles. They have tried that and it hasn't worked because there's a huge population that doesn't know how to do that, doesn't feel comfortable doing that, or has done that and needs such a level of guidance because they're scared, they're elderly, they're too sick, or it's just not for them, because there's 360 million plus people in this country that could all benefit from cannabis. And there's a very small percentage-wise that's going to feel comfortable walking up to somebody and saying, I have colorectal cancer, what do you have for me? And having somebody say, well, we have this chocolate bar, and if you break it up into 6 pieces, each one is going to give you X number of cannabinoids or terpenes or whatever. It's not a one-size-fits-all model. And so these people, we actually go into their whole patient intake for them. We look at what their whole health history. We do special mixtures and combination of cannabinoid and terpene profiles. It's a different patient model. The only thing that we have in common sitting up here is that we allow them to use the cannabis plant to treat them. And that's what we have in common here. But it's a different, like you say, it's an entrepreneurial thing, but it's a different form of medicine entirely. So it's not an either or, it's just different.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely, absolutely.
And I think that point.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted you to be on this roundtable, because I think that as we start talking about these products, we start thinking about them in a very commercial way, right? Packaging and labeling and advertising. And yet there's still, this population of people that are seeking, like they don't care if it's even labeled, as long as it's medicine that they need. They're not looking for fancy packaging, they're just looking for relief. And I think that that's something that may get lost as the commercialization of the market moves forward. So I want to ask one more question about kind of the labeling and packaging regulation. I want to start with James, and then we're going to move into talking about dabbing, because I think it's extremely important that we address this, because this is a huge move in the cannabis culture towards a very different way of looking at the plant and its uses. But before we start talking about that, I just wanted to get James and then maybe Wanda and Christy to talk about how packaging and labeling requirements, advertising, how you think that's changed, seeing as we have this kind of illicit substance, and now, James, the way you package it and label it, put it out there, it's really benign. It's not, it's something you would just see on a shelf, and so, how have you kind of taken this idea of an illicit stigmatized substance and then tried to make it very user-friendly and appealing to people to get rid of that fear that you're doing something wrong or using something wrong? So maybe you can speak to that, and then maybe Christy and Wanda talk a little bit about how packaging and promotion goes into your business and how you work with your products.
Well, that's a very multi-layered question. Of course, each state now, Washington and Colorado, has different labeling requirements. And I would be remiss on this panel. Well, this would be what our package would look like for the cartridge for the vape pen. So, it's got the strain indication, and they're indica, sativa, hybrid. Each one is a different color. And of course, on the back, we have our disclaimers and our California. There's different versions for different states, but in California, we're still under the Prop 215 SB 420 framework, which I see some of our esteemed attorneys in the room here, and we're still having grades, so I can have packaging. I've had 2 customers in San Diego that were raided by a multi-jurisdictional task force, including DEA and Homeland Security, and were put in handcuffs. His mother happened to be visiting the dispensary and was put in handcuffs for 9.5 hours. So it's great that we have all this progression and labeling and standards and so forth, but the war is very, very far from the time. So when I talk about advertising or labeling, I think in Colorado it gets. They've been free, people were on a tour of 100,000 square foot grow, they've got licenses and so forth, and California, especially our U.S. attorneys there, have decided that the memo does not apply to them, and California is some sort of Wild Wild West, even though if we are in compliance with SB 420. So it's a multi-layered question. Obviously, the packaging requirements in Washington and Colorado, very specific. Dictated from Department of Revenue and I-502 in Washington, and they have all sorts of ramifications. And this is kind of what we've been talking about for the last 4 or 5 years, which is professionalism, packaging, child-resistant containers, not child-proof, because that's a whole other thing. But it's the evolution of the industry. I was at the Champs show, which happened to co-locate here at the same time, which was pretty funny because they did not get the memo that moms and babes is not the order of the day yet. Here's one of their industry publications. I don't know if you can see that. So the evolution of this as a space and adult use, when it comes to packaging, professionalism, disclosing what's in the product, and giving people, adult use and patients, clear, defined choices. One thing we do know is the advent of entrepreneurial dollars into this space is making a huge impact. I'm part of the ArtView Angel Network, and I think Troy's in here too, the CEO, and we've seen an explosion in the last 12 months. We're something in the order of 75 accredited investors, including a few people that their net worth is probably in the billions, that have identified the Canada business, the uniquely American industry, as a place that is going to come to fruition. Ian, as a leading consultant, certainly sees this every day. So I hope that wasn't too much of a roundabout answer of how packaging comes in. It depends on where you are, but the evolution is certainly going in a direction that probably cannot be stopped.
Well, what it sounds like you're saying is that when states have clear-cut regulations that allow businesses to know what they need to do in order to comply, then you have a much more regulated market with transparency and information. And when you have a system like we have in California, where we're on very unsteady ground, it makes it very difficult for businesses to fulfill their requirements and their obligations to the public. So I think that, again, just speaks to the need for regulation. Christy, did you want to say anything about that?
Sure. I think that the majority of my time is actually spent thinking about packaging, working on packaging, and there are 2 things that I go for. Compliance, which is obvious, don't need to get into that, and empowerment. Empowering your consumer to make good choices, having a milligram amount that you have some semblance of science and math and lab testing, hopefully, of some sort to back up, and empowering the consumer to make great choices for their physical health or their ability to recreate in a way that's responsible and fun. This plant is a companion plant, and it has so much to offer us, and without empowering new consumers and medicinal users on how to engage with it, we've lost the war. So empowerment is really when I think about packaging, that's all I look for.
That's great. In social work, we call that a lot of times self-determination. So like an individual's feeling that they have the ability to make choices for themselves, and that comes with a great benefit to the individual, especially individuals that may be dealing with illness.
May I say one thing in regards to packaging real quick? So in our shop, we've had the opportunity to see virtually every vendor in Colorado that wants to sell an edible. And as this industry is moving forward, there is no place for edibles that are not properly labeled. The days of 1X, 2X, 3X, whatever the hell X means, are gone, right? It is, to be in Denver Relief, you must have a measured milligram content. you must have been able to provide us testing. We take your products and we test your products and we let you know if your milligram content is different from what you say, and we explain to you why we're not going to carry the product. If you are showing a lot of unnecessary skin on your labels, I don't understand. I love a beautiful woman, but I don't know what that beautiful woman has to do with the brownie or the candy that I'm eating. You know, those are two separate things. So, if your product is professionally packaged, if it's labeled, if it has the ingredient listing on it, if it has the milligram content, if it tells me where it was manufactured, these are all things that are required in Colorado. If you don't have that, you're not going to be in our shop in Colorado, you're probably not going to be in California, and you probably have no business being in this industry as a so-called professional.
My background has been in marketing and sales for the last 25 years. I'm the former vice president of 2 Fortune 100 companies. The idea that people have packaging and have products and then they're afraid to put them out there, to me, just seems ridiculous. If this is a business and this is an industry, promote it. Promote, 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 promote. Coca-Cola promotes. Pepsi promotes. Keebler promotes. You know, I mean, the idea of not having promotion and not doing it well is almost just silly to me, to not be in a business where you're not promoting. As far as packaging, Simply Pure led the industry in professional packaging. We actually produced machines that produced candy produced the same way that Reese's Cups and Hershey bars are all packaged. It's a foil sides, it's been sealed on both ends. The stuff stays fresh forever. Chefs did our food for us. It's the best tasting things that you're ever going to have. The dosage is the dosage has been done consistently and properly. When we did the packaging, we sat down with, you know, a bunch of different designers. We designed the logo, and we designed this to be sitting on the shelves of Whole Food Market. And quite frankly, if you're not looking at actually doing a product and putting it out there and being proud of it and getting rid of the word fear, then you don't belong in the industry. This is a new industry. Promote it. Act like it's something we're proud of. Make it look pretty. Make the consumer like it. Do it. There's no other way in my mind to do business. And if you're not in this to do business, be it medicinal or whatever else, I just don't really understand why we're all having these conversations if we're going to act fearful and be afraid. We're winning. 58% of Americans want this. Act like we're winning, which we are.
It doesn't probably need to be reminded, but I'll try. None of this is driven by government. None of this is driven by regulatory agencies. This is driven by the obvious two-legged stool of consumers that I would suggest those who are probably under 60 or so. We've all grown up with an idea that I am going to know what I'm going to put into my body. Right? I mean, one doesn't have to be a dyed-in-the-wool liberal to believe that there is some want to have information put in front of you before you put it in your body or put it on your hair or whatever. The other side of it, of course, is from the seller's point of view. The sellers clearly face right now, and talk about looking into the future here, because once marijuana is totally legal, there's a tort bar that's just waiting there, sharpening their knives for the same type of litigation they have successfully employed for 30 years against tobacco and other related products. And cannabis is absolutely, positively going to face those same sort of situations. So labeling and restricted packaging and everything like that, it's de rigueur.
Thank you. Then I want to move on to Gavin.
Yeah, I'd just like to bring up one issue here regarding dosage. It is absolutely essential that there be dosage on all edible and oral consumption products because overdosage is the biggest risk of those products. However, it's very curious to me the quantities of THC that are appearing on labeled products. This granola bar here, it says 100 milligrams of active THC. And this is not an untypical product. I have another one in my pack here that's a chocolate bar that has 180 milligrams of THC. It claims it's for 4 doses, which would work out to 45 milligrams a dose. The standard dosage for Marinol The government's prescription THC drug is 10 milligrams. And a lot of people say that that's too strong, so there is a 5 milligram pill. How is it that, and I have had some of these very strong candies, and I gotta say, they don't seem all that overpowering. Even though they say 40 milligrams, it doesn't seem all that super strong to me, and I'm suspecting that there are issues having to do with how your system digests them, the bioavailability of different kinds of edibles with different sugars or different fats is something that we really need to investigate and get to the bottom of.
That's a really great point. Christy, do you have a quick?
Yeah, I do. I would just like to say that there's peer-reviewed medical research studies on marijuana edibles that indicate that a liver uptake, that if it's a 100 milligram product, that possibly anywhere from 37 to 57 milligrams are actually bioavailable. I would also like to point out, depending on your age, sex, overall health, weight, and height, that edibles will affect you differently. Someone like myself, my ideal intake would be about 3 milligrams because my endocannabinoid system isn't highly activated to THC. Whereas someone who has been using cannabis for a long time, they might need upwards of 300 milligrams to achieve the same effect.
Yes.
And then I want to move on.
Yes, just one thing. We had a situation, I'm really glad that you brought that up, because we advise people that when they are going to ingest, because it's suppository, sublingual, then ingesting, and then G-tube as far as the absorption, and then inhalation are the different for absorption of THC. But we had a case where a parent of a patient of ours went to a dispensary last week to get some flowers to have, whatever, it doesn't matter. They picked up and they gave them an edible. They said, oh, here, try these. And they gave them a couple of the equivalent of Jolly Ranchers. And the mother, they're in their 30s, late 30s. So they said, oh, these will just relax you. And they took no labeling other than, and it was at La Brea dispensary, whatever, down in Los Angeles. And she took it, didn't feel anything for about a half hour, gave one to her husband, and for 7 hours they could not get off of the sofa. They have a 1-year-old baby that had just had chemo, and neither of them were able, they were so frightened. If anything had happened with that baby, they could not get off the sofa. They had to call somebody to come over to help them. And that's the kind of thing that scares the living crap out of me about edibles. And the fact that people hand them out like they were Jolly Ranchers, and it was like, here, like they're doing them a favor, giving them a little extra.
Right.
Give me.
And that's a really good point, and I think that does speak to the need to label. However, I'll place a little bit of a devil's advocate here and say that it's also part of the consumer to look and see what you're consuming, and if it's not labeled and you don't know what's in it, you have to make that choice. And, you know, I mean, if someone gives me an edible, and I mean, I'll be honest, I have very high tolerance for cannabis. If someone gives me an edible and it does not say how much is in it, I'm going to make sure before I take it that if it does happen that it knocks me out and I'm on the couch, that's okay. That I'm not going to, I don't have to get up and go to work or do anything. So I think, it's difficult because I think we have to meet in the middle. We have to have people that are labeling things, and we have to have consumers that understand the differences in edibles versus smoking. And so I want to kind of transition before we open it up to questions. It's something I think is a really important topic to bring up. It's about potency, and it's about dabbing. So, recently we've kind of seen dabbing come as a trend, using very, very high concentrates. And so my question to the panel, whoever wants to start, maybe Ian will start because you kind of see the population changes. Is this something that we're seeing a permanent shift in cannabis culture where dabbing is going to be this big market share of where we're going with this? Or is dabbing more a function of typical young behavior of trying to reach extreme intoxication where, instead of taking, 5 shots of Everclear, they're going to dabbing. And if that's the case, is it maybe a harm reduction technique for young people that might be binge drinking instead? So, kind of what's going on with this whole dabbing thing? There was a dab bus that was associated with Champs Expo, where you just got on the bus and dabbed and then got off. And so, what's going on with this? I'm seeing, bigger market share in high times and advertising, but is it a blip or is this an actual real phenomenon? So, Eve, you want to start?
I would say the answer to all of that is yes. Next question. So, I assume that most of you know what dabbing is. So, for those of you that don't know what dabbing is, let me tell you, dabbing 101. Dabbing is essentially a highly concentrated form of cannabis, hashish, generally extracted with the use of a solvent, the most popular one being butane right now, CO2 being another viable option. But by and large, when we speak about dabbing, we are primarily talking about a butane extraction. So the plant is dried, and there's different methods of creating it, which brings up another point which we can get into, and that's using a flammable solvent to extract. And where you're extracting, you very often hear, just as tornadoes often hit trailer parks, dabbing explosions often hit hotel bathrooms and hotel bathtubs, because people have no place where they can go to make these concentrated solvents. But if you do it safely, which it absolutely can be done, there are all kinds of machines that are available now. When I was speaking about the advancement in technology with extraction methods and ingestion methods, the dabbing culture is certainly leading what's going on as far as technological innovations. So somebody extracts the plant with a chemical solvent. What's left is the essential oils and sometimes the waxes. If you do it really well, you're removing the waxes, so you have only the essential oils. It's then put into different forms. There's something called shatter, which looks like glass, almost an amber glass or a piece of amber resin, where it's very hard, and if you throw it against the wall, it'll break, but if you keep it in your hands, it'll become very sticky. There's a wax, earwax. It looks exactly like it sounds, looks like earwax. There's an oil that looks like a very thick, kind of amber-colored motor oil. And essentially what somebody does when they are dabbing is very similar to hot kniving of the 70s. Somebody will take a nail, which looks not much different from a construction nail, but has a little cup at the top of it, heat it with a creme brulee torch until it's hot red, which is one of the things that dealing with a quote crack torch for cannabis consumption can have a negative stigma associated with what we're doing. So somebody heats that up till it's red hot and sticks a little dome on it so that when they touch the cannabis or the concentrate to it, the smoke doesn't dissipate and burst up in the air. So you put a little dome on it so that as the user is sucking on whatever device it is that they're sucking on, the smoke will go down and they inhale it. And it's a very, very concentrated, very quick a dab. And the effects are immediate. The effects are much stronger than if you were to smoke 2 or 3 or 4 bong hits. You can take ridiculously large dabs, but you don't have to. It's up to the user. But essentially, that's what dabbing is. It's a very highly concentrated form. We're starting to see all kinds of technological innovation. I was at an event the other night where instead of a blowtorch, they had an e-nail, and it's essentially a titanium nail that's hooked up to a soldering iron. It's dialed in to the exact delivery, the exact heat level that you want, so that there is no fire. So that is the overview of dabbing, and it really is, I think, a little bit of both. The question in regards to, is it something new? Is it something that younger users are really looking for that highest high? Yes. And is it something that somebody who's in a lot of pain and suffers from insomnia and who doesn't sleep at night takes a dab and they get to sleep a full evening? Yes, it is. And will it go away? No, it will not. Will it get bigger? Yes, it will. Will there be new technological innovations? Absolutely. I think that, we talk about the negative stigma associated with smoking. How cool is it going to be when you go to the store and you buy a 6-pack of buds, however you want to call it, whether that bud is in an oil concentrate, you stick it into a little device, a known milligram content, a little tiny dab of oil into a machine or into a small vaporizer. You know that you take 2 puffs and you know that you get that desired effect because things are homogeneous, it's mixed evenly, you have the same repeatability, just like when you take an aspirin or when you take an Advil or when you eat perhaps a well-dosed Jolly Rancher. So the dabbing culture is going to continue. It's going to get more discreet. It's going to get more professional. You're going to see soccer moms dabbing while they're taking their, while their kids are playing soccer I'm serious. With a pen, it's discreet, it's professional. They're able to maintain, just as somebody who's taking a pain pill and driving their kids to soccer. You know that happens all over the country every day, right? So yes, 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 yes.
Some people have called dabbing the crack cocaine of cannabis. I'm not judging how anybody chooses to use this substance, but this subject, or this part of the subject, you have to mention that solvent extraction in our state, the biggest cannabis state in the country, California, is specifically illegal in California Health and Safety Code. I won't state the section, but I think it's 11678.6. And it's another offense when they bust you for cannabis. So we won't go into the health issues because I think there are some serious questions. Some of our scientists have talked about the free radicals that are created from the superheating of the titanium nails that are used, and it wouldn't be something that I would be looking to ingest, but since California is the largest presently medical, soon adult use cannabis state, I think we need to say that law enforcement in our state, when they come into places now, they are specifically looking for butane and hydrocarbon extracted products. And they, in the recent bust, they have said, where's the wax? Where's the butane? Where's the machine? And because this is, when you talk about the policies here at this conference, and harm reduction and so forth, is, that we jokingly mention about, the kid that gets a can of butane and blows up the apartment complex. It's a very real public safety issue. And as the leaders of our industry, if we are not going to stand up and say, yeah, we can understand that you don't want to put this, highly flammable substrate together with, a 20-year-old kid that's looking to get super high, I don't think that we're serving our industry and our movement correctly.
Yeah, but aside from this whole flammability issue, I have very serious health issues with the high dosage that people are getting from dabbing. And this really first made an impression on me about 3 years ago or so when dabbing was coming in. There was a cannabis cup that was held in San Francisco, and 9/11 medical emergency teams had to be called in about a half a dozen times during this 2 or 3 day event. Now that really caught my attention because we were used to having, perfectly, one thing we used to be able to assure police when we were having a pot of that, hey, there's going to be no trouble. But when you have 9/11 coming in, that's a different story. And I was at another national conference not that long ago where there were 3 9/11 calls, 2 of which I witnessed personally, one of which involved somebody falling down and cracking their head on the cement. In another incident altogether, I know a woman who, my age, who had smoked more pot than I have, suddenly collapsed on the floor and cracked her front teeth. this is a serious safety concern, and if I were a state regulator looking at this, I would be very inclined not to allow it, I'm afraid. Certainly if you were having the context of a coffee shop or a public cafe where people come in and use pot, I think dabbing would raise very serious issues. And by the way, in the Netherlands, they don't allow concentrates at all.
So Wanda, I wanted to let you make a comment, and then we're going to open it up for questions, so people are thinking about what they might want to add.
Mine's mostly about potency, and I'll agree with the butane issues. We have a lot of people blowing themselves up. We've come out against butane very early in the industry. However, I do want to caution folks, because we also own a bar and a restaurant, and in my restaurant we have, we don't. We have carried before, when you can go into a restaurant or into a bar and you can order Everclear. You can also order, the world's finest wine. I think that it becomes an adult situation on how you choose to medicate or how you choose to recreationally be responsible with it. Are there people who are going to abuse it? Yes, there are. But there is one difference, though, that we all need to understand, though, about cannabis. And while you can fall down and bust your head and knock your teeth out and do some pretty stupid things to yourself, the potency or the plant itself, you cannot die from. It cannot kill you. If I drink a bottle of Jack Daniels, I can die. I cannot die from the idea of a dab, or I may not feel good, I may be stoned for the next 6 days, but after I sleep it off and have a cheeseburger and get my teeth fixed, from busting in the wall, I'm going to be okay. Now please know that I'm not making light of this, and I'm not recommending that people go out and fall down and bust their teeth and act like idiots in public. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying when we start to talk about this product and we go forward and we're talking about regulating this product, I always stop short of allowing people to put more regulation on cannabis than they put on alcohol, for instance, and other things in our society that are perfectly legal. So like I said, I can have as much Jack Daniels as I want, and to me that's a bigger issue than me dabbing.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because I can see both sides. I mean, the stigma that we're already fighting around, being cannabis consumers, and now we've got this tagline of the crack cocaine of marijuana, which, is a whole other story about demonizing crack cocaine, but at the same time, we know what that does to our political will, and how far we can push policies when we have that stigma attached, and we hear these stories of kids passing out and doing all this. However, we also know what happens when you prohibit a practice. It doesn't go away, it just goes underground. And given that a lot of the dangers associated with dabbing and making these products are associated with doing this underground, doing it in bathtubs, doing it where you're not supposed to, my fear would be if we start to say, well, we'll just ban concentrates, we're going to have even more explosions, we're going to have even more chemicals being used and people inhaling these things that we don't want. So I think, we have to be careful about how it makes us look as an industry and a movement. But at the same time, we have to rely on what we know about prohibition, which is when you prohibit a behavior, it just drives it further underground. So I think it's difficult, and it's an issue that we really have to think about and struggle with how we want to come around this as an industry and a movement. So I want to open this up to questions. So maybe, can you guys line up? Is that okay? I know. All right, Radical Russ, you're up first. Incognito.
I want to get back to that concept of the e-cigarettes and the vape pens and this being the new trend. One thing I found with being a cannabis reformer for many years is as all these restrictions came up against tobacco and tobacco smoking, and you can only smoke 50 feet away from here and so on, a lot of the cannabis community just didn't pay much mind to it, or that's not our problem, kind of ignoring the evil report. Now, when I see the ads for the e-cigarettes with Jenny McCarthy and Stephen Dorff, the framing behind it, the theme behind it is, take our freedom back, and it's time we were treated like adults. Is this the time now where the cannabis community starts to stick up for the tobacco community sticks up for the cannabis community, and we ally for that freedom issue rather than just what particular plant we're smoking?
Well, I have the mic, so I'll just make it short, and I'll pass it on to Dale, since he worked extensively on this legislation that was proposed, and we were able to get defeated at the end of the last California legislative session. I think the answer is absolutely. we do want to join with them. There's been a recent proposal in front of the FDA to regulate e-cigarettes as a drug delivery device, trying to split thing, but tobacco has always been sort of avoided from that. So the things that they've done, but also, you know, Alan would understand more than anybody, the multi-billion dollars that industry is starting to hit. They have the funding, they have the lobbying expertise to keep this. I feel like we should be, the vape pen and so forth, should be alive with the e-cigarette emerging industry in those things of freedom and keeping it out of the FDA-regulated drug delivery device, which would be somewhat of a killer. But Dale has worked so much on this recently, I think he should make a couple of comments.
You know, I don't think we can have alliance with the big tobacco companies. They've avoided us like the plague over the years. They're tainted anyhow, and they really want to have nothing to do with us in the first place. And the tobacco companies are the major part of the pro-tobacco lobbying, right? It comes from the companies. However, let me put in a word for this group that I've been working with called CASAA, which is, does anybody know what the acronym means? C-A-S-A-A-A. But anyhow, they lobby for smokeless alternatives. And mainly they were thinking of tobacco, e-cigarettes. And their board is entirely non-salaried. They have a volunteer board led by a guy named Bill Goodsall, who was originally involved in lobbying for restrictions on tobacco smoking in public, but feels very strongly that the e-cigarettes are a harm reduction method. So I think we can work with this group because they are a consumer lobby and are not tainted by the way the tobacco industry is.
Okay, thanks. Next question.
Hello, my name is Dominic Napoleon from San Francisco, California. Two quick comments. So I love dabbing, and I don't think that that's going to go away. And so regulating it and trying to prohibit it, I think, is going against exactly what we're all here for. And so I think that there are definitely alternate solutions to dealing with that. So my question really is for vaporizing, dabbing, alternate ways of other than smoking the actual flower plant matter. To get to the concentrates, butane is used, and so I know that there are a lot of concerns of vaporizers and materials that use butane, and so what is the kind of information that I could disseminate to those who are concerned, who are making the concentrates, and those that want to consume the concentrates about butane?
Hi, I can address this, or I'd like to. We're working with a group of gentlemen down in San Jose that have dispensaries in LA, San Francisco. I think they've got about 5 dispensaries, I'd have to check. And they've made it their personal mission to get the butane and hexane and naphtha and all the other nasty solvents out of the dispensaries and out of the whole dabbing, the whole industry. And so what they have done is they have now bought a beautiful supercritical extraction machine that they are going to allow us, and they've allowed us to educate them in it. And they are now doing subcritical CO2 extraction. And by doing the subcritical instead of the CO2 extraction, they are able to retain more of the terpenes. Then with a supercritical extraction, the pressure per square inch, if you get it to the PSI, and it's not necessary, but subcritical allows you to maintain more of the terpenes. And we're even doing experimentation where we're adding terpenes back into the extract. And in this process, if you do not decarboxylate the flowers first, that comes out into a shatter or a wax or whatever, just is potent and more so than what you're getting in the dispensaries. It's being sent and it's being tested, and it has all of the qualities you could possibly want that you're getting from this homemade bathtub butane quality shatter and wax that you're getting in a dispenser. dispensary now, except without all the harmful effects.
So I think Mara's making a good point, which is that, that's one of the things we would lose if we regulated concentrates out of the system, is that, these machines that make these really high quality concentrates are very expensive. They're not the kinds of things that people can buy for home production. So if we don't have the access to them, then people will be making things at home through, less safe means. So again, that's a vote to, keep concentrates in the regulatory framework.
I would just like to say that Dixie is coming out with a concentrate line early next year, and I'll make a commitment to you to have a Concentrate 101 downloadable on our website by March of 2014.
Okay, excellent.
Hello. I have a question about dabbing. I know that I could take wax and put it on a bong and smoke the whole bowl to my head and I'll survive and be okay, but as soon as it's put on a skillet or a rig, it will blow your mind and you'll pass out. Do you know, has there been any research on, is the actual device used for dabbing changing the way it affects us, including the blowtorch and the heat that's used to dab?
Yeah, that's a good point, because people have been putting concentrates like hash and things on bowls and smoking them for a very long time and not having the same impact.
The first time I've heard this particular story, but anyhow, I think probably what's going on is a difference in the heat that you're exposing it to. And that's something that obviously has to be controlled in a fairly predictable way. We don't know yet what the ideal heat is.
Yeah, well, actually, when you smoke it, you're losing over 70% of it up into the air. And when you heat it with the creme brulee torch, you're getting much more of it more quickly, and it's being uptaken, and the dabs have not been decarboxylated. And so you're getting the THC taken up into your receptor sites much more quickly, and it's going like immediately, right, massive doses are just going right to your CB1 receptor sites. And that's really what's happening on a physiological basis, which is why people are getting in. I just want to let you know, even though we love dabbing, we think it's absolutely one of the most wonderful things to happen to medicine when used medicinally correctly.
Ian, did you have a comment?
Sure you have.
I love dabbing.
So there were a lot of allusions to the use of cannabis extracts for cancer treatment, allusions to the Sanjay Gupta documentary for Dravet. I have this document actually presenting overwhelming evidence that cannabis extracts can reliably eliminate cancers in humans. It's not even in a debate anymore. It works. So my question is, I can prove this to anybody here in 15 minutes that it works, but if cannabis is the proverbial cure for cancer, if it is, and I'm telling you that it is, but if it is, what does this mean for the movement and what do we do about it?
Okay, so let's say that we have a lot of suggestions about the role that cannabinoids play in cancer treatment. Should we be, there's kind of some fear on the part of some people in the movement of saying that statement definitively, because the minute you say cannabis cures cancer, you have a bunch of people that say, no it doesn't, and I can tell you why. So how should we approach this claim, and what does it mean to our movement, and how does it vary by method of ingestion? Because individuals thinking that they can cure their cancer by smoking a joint is a very different thing than, right, I'm saying people who think they can, is a very different thing than using an extract like Mara makes. So how does the method of ingestion go into that cancer claim?
Okay, so 2 comments and then I'll pass to Mike. Essentially, I agree. I've had the pleasure of working in medical cannabis for 4 years with amazing results. And I have a patient I worked with rectal cancer that we made suppositories for to great effect, and he is still alive today. So there is peer-reviewed medical research available online that is probably the same documents that you have with you. But I will also say there is a concern, and I don't want this to be taken away. And this is a fear-based comment, my apologies, but I want to be pragmatic in our approach to who and win the hearts and minds of people individually, because right now we're a small, passionate group, very passionate, that if we can fill this room or get the entire hotel to tell 10 other people, that's when we can really own that conversation. And it's about empowerment and owning the message.
Thank you. Gail?
Yeah, I would say we should, in all circumstances, avoid saying that cannabis cures cancer. Scientifically, it's completely unsubstantiated, and the medical community would rightly be outraged by this. I've talked to my own doctor, my own cancer doctor, in fact, Dr. Donald Abrams, who's an expert on this sort of thing, and Dr. Lester Grinspoon, our good friend and mentor, and they are very concerned about claims that cannabis can cure cancer because that induces people to give up proven, effective, so traditional mainline cancer treatment. And there have been cases, that Dr. Grinspoon was telling me, of patients he has lost because they forewent the traditional treatment and tried to rely on cannabis, and they died. And by the way, I know a lot of heavy pot smokers who've gotten cancer, including myself.
Doesn't work.
So, you know, and the history of quacks who have claimed, I've got a cancer cure, this goes back over a century. So you're really setting yourself up for being labeled as a quack if you make such claims. Nobody can claim that you've cured any cancer at all until the cancer has been gone for 5 years. And Dr. Abrams points out there is no such documented case whatsoever as of yet. Now there might be. I think it makes sense as you know, if you have cancer, you know, to supplement your therapy with cannabis. There's good evidence to think maybe it might be helpful, especially in certain cancers. Go ahead and do it, but by all means, don't rely on it.
Thank you. Quick comment.
Very quickly, and this is important, just especially since this is I cringe when somebody says cannabis cures cancer, because I don't believe it. I don't believe that there's such a thing as a cure for cancer, no matter how many years, because I think cancer is something that is controlled in the body. And I think that cannabis is a phenomenal integrated tool that is used along with good medicine from other sources, with diet, with exercise. It's a mind-body spirit that kills cancer. And cannabis is a phenomenal tool, and we've had remarkable success. But to tell somebody that we're going to give you 60 grams in 90 days, and you're going to go from this to this to this, you're going to take this, and you're going to be puking your guts out, and then you're not going to have cancer, and we're going to videotape you, and you're going to tell these people, I think it's criminal. And I will not support that in any way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mara.
I welcome cannabis, by the way.
Okay, we're gonna move on. Real quick, you want to respond real quick, and then I want to make sure we get more questions.
Of the 22,000 studies plus of cannabis, the largest group today is in the cancer research, as it should be. Everybody in this room will be touched by cancer personally or secondarily, so it's a huge market. It's the most fascinating place where cannabis research is going on, but I agree with everybody here who's put out this forewarning that you cannot seriously go out into public and claim cannabis cures cancer.
Thank you. Next question?
Doug Willinger, Freedom of Medicine and Diet. What work has been done on using these new devices for basically opiates and coca extracts, using them either to replicate opium smoking or even heroin injection? You can conceivably do it that way, depending upon the concentration. Or with coca, even like as an alternative. We used to have coca leaf cigarettes in the late 1800s. There's a whole history of that. You go on my blog, Freedom of Medicine and Diet, look up coca leaf cigarettes and cheroots, and those are low dose, safe, and would be a safer alternative actually than the nicotine version we have now.
So has there been any move? That's a really interesting point. What about vaporizers for opiates, or vaporizers for coca, or amphetamines?
Stay with me.
Well, there's certainly researchers and entrepreneurs that are looking to expand into coca leaves, no doubt about it.
Question?
Sure, great. Hi, my name is Mike. I've been out here for 4 years doing retail operations and development for dispensaries. My question essentially is, how are we going to stop or limit this fear-driven, nasty separation of medical versus recreational To me, all a recreational patient is someone that hasn't been educated enough by us, by our community, on the value-added benefits of this plant. Who is a recreational user? Regardless how you ingest the plant, you're getting medical value out of it. Why are we separating our community?
I love that comment. And the reason why I love it, when I talk about cannabis all the time, and like I said at the very beginning, you can have an aspirin to stop a heart attack, you can have an aspirin to stop a headache. It's so hard for us in Western hemisphere of this world to accept the fact that medicine does not have to be, shot in your body with some, huge hypodermic needle or taste horrible, or you have to go to your doctor and sit there for 6 hours to get chemo or whatever it may be. Especially when you're talking about, as we've all talked about it here, the whole mind, body, and spiritual experience of healing oneself. Our society is overwhelmed with anxiety issues, with sleep deprivation issues. The whole idea that we are stressed out all the time, those are all healthcare issues. So if we can find things in our society, which quite frankly we have been self-medicating now for hundreds of years with alcohol, with cocaine, with heroin, with cannabis, whatever it may be, but the idea that of all of those substances, this is the one thing that actually does bring some benefit. I don't think anybody's ever down a bottle of vodka and says, wow, I felt better the next morning. That's never happened. So, the idea that we can actually feel better while being recreational about it and not causing harm to our bodies is, I think, a whole new for the idea of Western medication. And I think that that's the idea and the issue that we're having with a lot of politicians, quite frankly, that can't seem to get through their head that, yes, this makes you giggle, this makes you have a good time, it relaxes you, and it may also help end your sleep issues, it may help end your anxiety issues, and for veterans, may help end your PTSD issues. So if we can start to look at healing oneself and feeling good at the same time, we're in a good place.
Sure, but with that said, the word recreational continues to backstep us because we're not using the right words. Recreational means
adult use.
Exactly. And I just think that really needs to be part of our community and the words that we use.
And I think it is here in Colorado, and I would argue that Colorado is a little bit more advanced in terms of development, in terms of vocabulary and semantics. I would also argue that if you really want to get down into it, it's all medical to some degree, because what I use it for my anxiety or my therapeutic benefits, I call it what you want. It's medical. It's helping me. I'm feeling better about myself. That is, whatever you want it to be. The difference between medical and recreational. The reason why we are differentiating it here in Colorado is because we are in the middle of a cultural shift. And in order to educate the public and in order to make it so that it becomes a reality, we eased in the use of medical use. The general public realized the sky didn't fall. The kids aren't all out on the streets dabbing in public at all times of every day. Teen use has decreased in Colorado since medical took effect. And so now we are coaching in to the understanding that all adults who choose to, in their own home, that want to medicate or smoke or whatever it is that you want to call it, are doing so. And so it's one and the same, but it's that cultural shift, and it's the evolution of the ending of prohibition. And it's what allows us to get around these cultural stigmas and make way to get there. I believe strongly in medical marijuana. I don't think that it's a sham. I think that it works. I think that there is a real reason for medical marijuana here, and it's good that we started this, and it's now allowing it to take place to understand that recreational use is effectually still medical.
Thank you.
So did anyone else have anything to say about that before we close? I'm sorry for those that didn't get to ask questions.
One very quick thing. There is an actual difference, a little bit. It all is medical. It all is medicinal from the standpoint that it makes you feel great and everything. But we can medicate all day long and then decide at the end of the night to